this is Off the Cuff Nurses, and I am Dr. Minter.
And I'm Nurse Bryan.
And I'm CO Quinn.
And she is joining us for a new perspective on corrections.
Yes.
So we're going to talk today about stress relief and stress management. So that has come up because working in corrections can be a little stressful.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had requests, and even if we haven't had requests, we're going to talk about it anyway, about how to manage stress when you're working in a high-stress environment, and then you go home and you have more stress.
Right. Exactly.
Because then it can become like a cauldron of just boiling over with, where you can't, there's no release. And then you can start lashing out, and maybe things don't go the way that it should, and then you're in the news. So, what we're going to do from at another podcast, not this one, is we're going to follow this up with a couple psychiatrists that have agreed to come on and do more professional stress management. But I thought in this podcast we could start it off by discussing about how to manage stress when you're in a high-pressure job like corrections. And so you wind up giving the best care to people that you're dealing with at the time. And when you go home also, and you don't lash out at the people that you might live with, right? So what do you guys do after you have a bad shift?
Straight to the bar.
Yeah.
No, kidding. Kind of.
Kind of. Well, yeah, it's
when you
probably
work
not the
night
best.
shift, it's tough to go straight
Yeah.
to the bar in the
There
morning.
might be one that's open.
7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably a detrimental thing to do, but if you did it all the time. But what would be kind of some positive things that you could manage stress that you wouldn't wind up taking it out either the next time you went to work or again, kids or whatever else?
It's important to get enough sleep.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of people don't do, especially on night shift, because you feel like, you're losing a lot of the daytime that would be useful for other things, but you really can't think that way. You have to make sure, get enough sleep, still exercise, eat well, which is not always easy, especially with a shift work job. I don't know, like me personally, when I leave work, I usually drive home, don't listen to any music, just complete quiet, kind of process what happened throughout the shift. And then when I get home, just try to let that go before I go into the house.
I think for me is my problem is I try to block out everything I just went through at work, like all the trauma, mentally. And I think what we need to do is talk about it. So for me, I feel better when I talk things out, like talk to my husband about it. Because he always asks me, he's like, how was your day? I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. But really, it's good to talk about it and let it out, instead of just like you said, like a pressure cooker, just letting it boil up and then eventually just explode emotionally or whatever. So I think that's super important too, along with getting enough sleep.
Right. And I think it's not only corrections, it can be any traumatic event. Specifically to healthcare. So over the years, I've had a lot of traumatic events, and I think we talked about mass casualty situations, which are fortunately few and far between. But for example, when I worked in a hospital, we had a postpartum death, a patient who had just had a baby, and she had an amniotic embolism, meaning that the amniotic fluid through a clot and then put her into cardiac arrest. And we coded her all day long. Nobody ate. It was, and then in the end, the charge nurse of the ICU came to me because I was a hospital supervisor, and she said, I mean, it wasn't looking good. It was just terrible. The family was in there. They were crying. I mean, she was a young girl. And they said they want to bring the baby in. The baby was fine. And it was basically my decision. So I looked at the hospitalist and I said, what do you think? And she said, yeah, let's do it. Because we knew that we were going to call it. So in between CPR, she would get a pulse back and then she would lose it. And so we brought the baby in and put the baby on the mother. And then she coded for the last time. And then the hospitalist called it. And that was highly traumatic. And
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and then you got to go home, and then I got to deal with all my kids and everything else, and then you got to completely turn around and go from this traumatic event to trying to deal with what's going on at home.
Yeah, like you pretty much have to pretend it didn't happen. Like you have to like shut it out completely, and that's not good either.
No, or you try to explain it to people that don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
like you try to explain I had a death in the hospital, which certainly doesn't put perspective on exactly what happened. So, and even in corrections, same kind of thing would happen. Making that jump to going back home is very difficult. So I kind of wanted to talk about that too, and how to, relieve that. I found that when I had traumatic events, I would wind up sleeping for like 2-3 days afterwards. Mm-hmm. Like another supervisor would call, or the chief nurse would call, and I'd be taking a nap. I mean, it felt like my brain would have to, get back into normal mode. It was in a traumatic mode. And then finally I would recover. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it was, over the years, they've gotten better about bringing in counselors afterwards. I don't think that most people, especially in corrections, don't take advantage of it.
Right.
I don't, you think so, or?
No, definitely not. I mean, we have a crisis team at the facility I work at, and they're always available, and very, very few people take advantage of that.
Why?
I think that a lot of correctional officers consider that kind of like a weakness, like it would look weak to accept that. I don't know. We've tried to change the stigma as far as that goes, but it's still been really tough.
And I think it's important to have a network, at least, to talk, you say, to friends or mm-hmm. whatever. I just don't think that family members always get it as to what sometimes correctional people can go through, or healthcare people, or whatever, when there's something specific to that. And I personally don't know how to explain it. I would explain, okay, a postpartum patient died, like I said, but it doesn't explain how horrific mm-hmm. the whole situation was.
Yeah. Like being in the room with that at that moment. Like talking about it's different, but being in it is totally different.
Right. And then your brain, like PTSD, runs through that over and over. Like, could I have done that different? Mm-hmm. Should I have done that? Should I have called it earlier? Should we have gotten so-and-so? Or, I mean, whatever. I mean, mm-hmm. just what could I have done different?
Right.
None of that makes any difference because the outcome is the outcome. So...
But you sit there and you question yourself. Like I do the same thing. I'm like, well, could I have done that differently or earlier? Would it have made a difference or not? So.
Right. So I guess my question is, what, besides a 7:00 bar run, if you're faced with something like that, because we've all been in it, I know that. What are positive things that you can do to not take it out on people that you don't want to take it out on?
Take advantage of like that crisis team that they have there.
If they do it.
If they have it.
But what else besides that? I mean, I think they're there for a day or two or whatever they're there for. But
I think long term though, like making time for yourself, like whether that's yoga, exercising. I know it's so hard because like you mentioned earlier, like with the shift work, I mean, it's even hard to meal plan with shift work. I mean, that's why a lot of us eat like fast food, which is not good for us at all. But anyways, so just taking time for you, not for your kids, not for your significant other, like for you specifically, whether that's, like I said, yoga, exercise, or whatever. Get your own hobby.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, you have to have an outlet mm-hmm. some way. Something.
Even if it's like crafts. I mean, some people like to make crafts. I'm just saying something.
Yeah, but I can't see correctional officers doing yoga or crafts.
Well, you never know.
Fishing.
fishing.
Yeah. So
Like-
okay. So you guys both fish.
Yes.
So what? All right. So let's set the scene. So say you have some traumatic event, some horrible whatever. I mean, a death, mass casualty, or something happens at work. That's or even just interpersonal issue that's traumatizing. So then, what would you guys do to work through that?
I mean, me personally, I would go home, try to decompress a little bit, make sure I get some sleep, and then hopefully I have some time off following that incident to be able to do something that I enjoy, which would be like playing with my dogs, going on my boat. Even just walking sometimes is huge. Like just getting out, going for a walk, fresh air. I'm big into the outdoors, so just stuff like that helps. The problem, like with jails and prison work and stuff like that, especially right now, is that everybody's so short-staffed.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
there's a ton of money to be made on overtime. And it's probably the same way for medical. So everybody's really trying to maximize that. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people that, work in that type of work are trying to maximize their money right now. You can go there, you can make double or more of your normal salary working. And unfortunately, the more you're there in that jail or correctional setting, the more exposed you are to these incidents. So you never really get time to like reset. And that's something that's important to note. Like I'm a supervisor in a correctional facility, so I see that a lot. I see the same exact people coming into work the overtime shifts. There's like a handful of people that just do it routinely. And I see those people, constantly exposed to these high stress situations, and you check in with them and they're always like, I'm fine, I'm good. But it makes me wonder what they do in their off time when they have it, if they have it, to actually mitigate stress. So I don't know. I mean, it's important. We've got to find ways for people to kind of carve out time.
Correct.
Yep.
Great.
And for me, it's like making time for the kids. And when I say making time for the kids, I mean like putting aside the laundry and the dishes and actually sitting on the floor with them and giving them that individualized attention is like the hardest thing for me, because when I'm home, I have laundry up to here, dishes over here, the floors need mopped. It's awful. And so just me having that time with the kids is huge for me. Another thing is that in the correctional setting, there's little to no windows. So it's like there can be a hailstorm
true.
outside and I can't see anything. So for me, it's important to get sunlight. For a while there, my hair was falling out like in clumps. I mean, literally, it was like completely thinning out at the scalp. And I realized I was like super low in vitamin D. So now I'm taking supplements. I'm outside now all the time when I'm off of work, especially now that it's summer. So to me, that's really important. The kids and just getting outside.
That's another good point.
Yeah.
As far as the vitamins,
Yeah.
to kind of go off of that, medical care. Making sure that you go to medical appointments.
Yes.
I'm guilty of that too at times. So, you have to take care of yourself in
It all ties in.
all of the ways. Nobody wants to give up their fun free time that they have that's very limited for those kinds of things, doctor's appointments, dentist appointment, and so on and so forth. I don't even like taking the time to go get a haircut because it takes time away. But if I can ride my motorcycle there, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of stuff in all seriousness, especially with correctional employees. I think that they just push it on the back burner.
Right.
Put it to the back burner. And then before you know it, it turns into something serious or not so good.
So do you find that, but I'll ask your opinion, do you find that law enforcement officers don't tend to go to the doctor as much, or?
Definitely. I think that's definitely a trend. And I mean, really, that's something that I know to be true.
Why?
I'm not sure why that is, because honestly, we all complain and we all worry because we have a shorter life expectancy than other careers. But then I don't think we're really taking care of ourselves in that way, which might create that shorter life expectancy. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think like just bouncing off what you said earlier about how people are I don't want to say addicted, but they're becoming so used to that income, that overtime income, that their days off, those are days for rest and relaxation and to like recharge so they can go back to work. And because they're, taking advantage of the overtime, they're not getting that downtime that they need,
Right.
So it's super important that they need to take advantage of that.
Right.
People aren't.
No, and you have to carve it out because it'll bite you later on. So, for example, I take blood pressure medications, and somebody said, "Oh, well, that's a lot of blood pressure medications." I'm like, "Well, it's better that I have blood pressure medications and I take it versus not take it, right? Because that would be way worse." And I feel a lot better. I mean, when my blood pressure was up, like I felt like I don't know, like I was more worked up then. But I mean, you have to establish, and not me. If you're in corrections, you need to establish a good rapport with primary care provider, which does not include the nurse practitioner at the correctional facility.
Correct.
I mean, you can ask my opinion. I can't tell you how many guys or whoever will come to me and say, "Well, do you think about my whatever palpitation?" No, just go in and get it looked at.
Right.
I mean, I'm happy to give them some feedback, but I am not there to treat. So, and I don't really know what the reticence is on that, why they won't go in, but they need to get it taken care of, and they need to have a physical. I mean, it's usually paid for and it's important. So and there's gyms at work also. I think also on night shift, it's difficult because you lose that extra day.
The first day off.
That first day off is
It's
kind
a waste.
Is
It's
a
kind of
waste.
a waste. You're just like a zombie.
Yeah.
Right. And then you got to make an appointment and whatever else. But you got to do it. You got to go to a primary care provider and you got to get looked at and you got to get your chronic issues under control. So, and if you're having an issue, you got to get it addressed. And I don't know how to get that across. I haven't found the golden thing to say, you got to go to the doctor. I think the question is why they don't go. So, and you would know that better than we would, but
I don't think that I do know. I mean, all I can, guess is that it has to do with the job itself. Like people are afraid that if they go and then there's something significant that would affect their ability to do their job, then all of those things start to come crashing down because the whole point of the job is to have the great pension and the early retirement and this and that. So I think that it's kind of like what's the word? I think it's like a catch-22. Like, they should go because the issues could be caught early and they could be treated and you could work through it and then you could live out the rest of your life and have a good career. But people worry that if they do go, something's going to be exposed. They don't want that to be exposed, so they just ignore whatever signs and symptoms they're having and hope for the best, which obviously isn't the right way to go about it. But somehow we have to kind of change that mentality, try to get people more on board. I don't know. It almost makes you wonder, like, if you could bring a medical provider to the jail during the shift and get some things addressed during the shift. I wonder if that would work.
That's a good idea.
yeah, there's a neighboring county that it's not on the campus, but it's right by the campus, and they have contracted to do that. So that all this provider does is take care of employees of the sheriff's department.
It's not bad.
Yeah, and they get free medications and free health care or low cost. So,
And then it wouldn't take people away from their overtime.
Right.
well, yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
for a minimal amount,
Yeah,
but
Right.
So one of the things that I did when I was doing my doctorate degree was I looked into why do people take medications and don't take medications, and I think I did a little blurb on that on medication adherence. But you could take that and you could bring that over to just healthcare, and the bottom line is the whole thing that I wrote up, whatever, this whole nightmare 70-page thing, was that it's got to be important to them. If it's not important to them, they're not going to do it. So they have to see the value in it. And so when you take a blood pressure medication, you don't necessarily feel anything with a high blood pressure. So you may not feel any better. That's why people take benzodiazepines, because they feel better. Or they take opioids because that makes them feel better. They don't, you don't come in and, people don't get arrested and come in and say, yeah, I take 50 lisinopril every day.
Right? I need it now.
Yeah, and we don't do a urine drug screen for lisinopril because they don't feel any different.
Right.
So there's no advantage to them to going out and buying lisinopril and hoarding it and taking it and snorting it. So it doesn't make them feel any better. So and that's why people don't take their medication. They don't fill it on time, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the same thing could be applied, or worse, to mental health, right? I mean, I guess what's the feeling on correctional officers and mental health?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing battle as far as educating correctional officers about how to take care of themselves as far as that goes as well. That's what you mean, right? You don't mean like the stigma associated with inmates and mental health.
No, I mean correctional
personal
officers.
care.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. In law enforcement, corrections, there's a fairly high rate of suicides. So we've experienced some of those at the agency I work at, and it's almost like after the fact, suddenly there's an outcry, and there's a lot of blame put on administration or, the chiefs or the sheriff or whoever it is of your facility. But really, like what you said, it's important that people start to get on board early on and kind of take some responsibility for their own personal mental health. I think that's huge, but I do think that there's a stigma associated with that. Again, people feel like if they are asking for help, if they're not okay, like we have a saying, it's okay to not be okay. That's kind of taking off more. But we have to even do more to assure people that, we've got their back, no matter what they're going through as far as an issue at work or even personally.
Actually, working at the facility that I'm at, I've experienced the same thing with suicides and everything. And then, like she had mentioned, afterwards, after the fact, there's a lot of there might be emails or messages out saying, if you need help, reach out, there's this therapy, this, that. But a lot of people don't take advantage of that. And a lot of that's not brought to light until after someone, commits suicide.
Well, I think there's also, it can be overwhelming. Like, for example, I mean, I was in corrections, I guess, at the time. But, and I think it's even more stressful probably being a correctional officer sometimes than medical, because you're on the front line all the time. And then you go home and you may have this messed up situation at home that you're trying to deal with.
Right.
So you got some stress with a wife or a husband or whatever else. And, I had 5 little kids at the time, and I'm trying to manage that. And I had a spouse at the time that was not helpful, and to say the least. And then you're trying to manage all of that. And then you're trying to manage work on top of it.
Yep.
And I always used to say, I never get a break. I never get a break. And it was true. Like I couldn't just take off and do something. And there was quite a long period of time where I could not get a break at home, and I couldn't get a break at work because I would go to work, and you're on when you're at work. Mm-hmm. You're on.
You have to be.
Yeah, I mean, and you are managing all these things, and then you go home, and I've heard stories from different people without naming them as to what's going on in their home, and it's fairly horrific. Mm-hmm. I mean, people have autistic family members that they're trying to take care of at home, or they're trying to take care of an elderly mother at home, or, you know, they've got a wife who's got mental health issues, or, I mean, I don't know what else.
I've heard all that, all kinds of stuff like that, yeah.
But, and there's no break to it. And I don't really have the answer to it, but it just seems like if you don't, I guess the bottom line, I think, is that if you don't take care of yourself, then how can you take care of somebody else appropriately?
I think that that's really accurate. And I think that that poses a problem all the way around. You know, I have some coworkers that have really difficult situations at home as far as they themselves are even in like relationships that are unhealthy, you know, emotionally abusive, maybe even physically abusive. And then you're coming to work and dealing with unruly inmates, stressful situations, drug overdoses, you know, just a lot of different stressful things. So, yeah, I don't really have the answer to it either. I think that, again, there's the importance of making time for yourself. You have to do that somehow. You have to make that work. And honestly, you know, it's important to have a good support staff that you work with, like a supervisory support staff, and hopefully, you know, someone that you could go to
Right.
and explain your situation, and maybe they could do something for you for the time being, or they could, you know, maybe you could switch your hours if need be, and or whatever needs to happen to be able to get you through a tough time.
Right. Agreed.
And I think it's important too to like remember that we don't know what someone's going through at home. Like we had mentioned, like all these people have, you know, maybe unhealthy relationships, or they're dealing with like an autistic family member they're having to take care of at home, that we need to treat everyone, you know, nice and be kind, because we don't know what people are going through. That's super important. I think we forget that all the time. I see people, you know, talk to people nasty, you know, even nursing staff. And I think a lot of times they're overworked or they're tired, but, you know, there has to be some like kindness in there. You have to remember that. And I think people forget. So,
and another thing to piggyback on that is to also not just supervisor, is maybe just a trusted coworker also. So when I broke my leg about 10 years ago, and it was pretty bad. So, I mean, I was just totally overwhelmed. My mother had broken her arm, lived with me, and I broke my leg, just a story for another day, but another time. Anyway, so I was non-weight bearing. I was on crutches, and it was just not good. Of course, I had 5 kids, so on top of everything. So my coworkers, they were like, they said, we're going to get you a gift certificate to a restaurant. I said, no, what am I going to do with a gift certificate to a restaurant with 5 kids and a 90-year-old mother? So anyway, they said, well, how can we help, is what they said. I said, and this is where I think people say, call me if you need anything. But that is so generic, it doesn't really help. So nobody calls when you say you need something. They said, how can we help? They said, do you want us to go to Costco and get you some prepackaged meals? I said, yes, that would work. And they did. They went to Costco, and somebody brought it over, and they filled the freezer up. That was helpful. So, you know, a restaurant certificate, you know, really wouldn't have done anything. But to articulate what you need can help. Or if you need rotating meals, they have websites where you can sign up, and people can sign things up, at least as a temporary measure. So I think that person doesn't always want to say, oh, no, I'm fine. Well, maybe just say, I'm not fine and I need X. Because people want to help, I think. I think most coworkers or supervisors would want to help somebody who's in a jam. And I don't think that they think that they're taking advantage of them. I think that they want to do something for them because they work with them and they care about them. So, okay, so we'll hold it at that. So I am Dr. Minter.
I'm Nurse Bryan.
CO Quinn.
And we will see you next time on Off the Cuff Nurses.